Welcome to the Chasing Goalpost podcast, where we elevate authentic human stories while sharing personal finance, growth, and career insights along the way. Now, just a reminder for the audience, all of our disclaimers can be accessed via our website at www.chasinggoalposts.com/disclaimers. Our guest's journey into her career was unexpected. She began with a love for baking, her childhood passion, and somehow found herself in the world of writing. This path led her into the corporate realm where she excelled by leveraging her talents. Eventually, she launched her own thriving business, but her path was anything but linear. Filled with challenges and triumphs, her story is one of resilience and adaptability, which I'm sure all of us can relate to. And therefore, I'm excited to introduce Liz Ellis. Liz, welcome to the Chasing Goalpost podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm extremely excited to be here and very honored that you think my story is something your audience will be interested in. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, everyone's story is somewhat unique, and therefore maybe you could give us a brief overview of who Liz Ellis is.
Sure. My short answer is always I'm a writer, but to give you a little sense of where I come from, I grew up in Massachusetts in a tiny college town, Williamstown, Massachusetts, very small town from a very academic family, and was educated similarly at a small college in Massachusetts, Amherst College. My dad's a professor. My mother's career was in PR for colleges. So it was very academically focused background and very small town background that I grew out of, which was a tremendous advantage and a tremendous privilege.
So Liz, we gave a brief overview in the opening, but we would love to hear your version of the story. Why don't you walk us down memory lane and how you went from chasing your passion for baking to leveraging your talents as a writer. I mean, those are very different ends of the spectrum. So we'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to tell it. I finished school. I graduated with an anthropology degree in 1992, which was not a great time to get jobs. And even more so than that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I think, didn't have a very successful, I learned amazing things. I had an amazing college experience, but it was not successful in helping me see a path forward professionally, which was a source of great anxiety. And of course, at that time, at 21, I thought I was the only one who felt that way. But I really knew how to bake because that had been a childhood hobby and a childhood passion. My parents had very much indulged me with full access to ingredients and kitchen and equipment. So I went and got a job as a pastry chef or a pastry cook in a Hilton hotel. And that was really kind of like spending a year in culinary school. I really learned professional baking and loved it, and kind of transitioned from that into catering jobs. I worked in a country club. I was the catering director. I made wedding cakes, just kind of doing stuff that was all in this world of food. And it was driven, I would like to say, I was following my dream, which I sort of was, but I also was sort of unsure of my skills beyond that. And I knew that that was a comfort area for me, and it was what I felt comfortable pursuing, if I'm very honest. I'm very glad now that that was my professional first chapter, but it was not entirely motivated by the things I would hope to be motivated by now. But anyway, I was working as a catering director in a country club, working weddings every weekend, working till 2 a.m, all this stuff. It's hard, physical work. I liked it. And the person at the country club, this was in Austin, Texas, who did the newsletter, quit or left to have a kid, or I don't know what happened. They disappeared. And this was way back when. And somebody was in the 90s. Someone was like, well, Liz knows how to use the computer. Because I would write up proposals for events and stuff. Liz knows how to use the computer. Maybe she could do the newsletter. I was like, okay. So I got trained up on the 1990s software to do this desktop publishing. And I started writing the country club newsletter, which was who's getting married, or what's the theme night for this month's special dinner, or, it was just very, very basic marketing stuff. And I realized it was just so easy. It was so easy and fun. It was just like a break in my day. I was not on my feet. I was not managing a crew of wait staff. I was not managing cranky chefs. I was not up at 3 a.m. It was so easy and comfortable to me. And I thought, you know what? This if you can get paid to write like this, maybe I should look into this because I don't want to be on my feet working in kitchens for the rest of my life.
Yep.
Yeah. So when I ended up moving to Colorado with my then husband, I decided, okay, no more kitchen, no more catering work for me. I'm going to look for work as a writer. And I applied for my first job as a copywriter, a catalog copywriter, not knowing what that was. I literally had not heard the word copywriter before. I didn't know anything about marketing, anything, but I knew writing was easy for me. And I did a test, and I got the job. And from there, I just, discovered this thing called copywriting that came so naturally to me. And I was so grateful, but I still didn't have the bigger context of like what copywriting is and what marketing is. And I was still doing food writing on the side and also a little food styling for photography. And that ended up being what really opened doors ultimately, because it was on a food styling photo shoot where I was the stylist, that the art director and like the brand person were there in the studio with me. And I overheard them over in the corner thinking about the layout for the composition we were shooting. It was a cell sheet, and like, okay, how should we compose it for the layout? Because this was also like long ago. So graphic design tools weren't what they are now.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what's the headline going to be? And they're over there trying to figure out a headline. And I heard them and I walked over. I said, I'm actually a writer. Like, would you like me to write your headline? And they're like, oh, could you? Thank you. And that started a connection, and I kept it up. And a while later, actually, when I really needed the job, it was a time in my life when I really needed the job, they called and they're like, we have a copywriter opening. Will you join us? And that was with White Wave Foods, which was a pretty hot company at the time in the natural food space here in Colorado. And I got to come in really at the beginning there as a copywriter. And then I started understanding the context. I started operating in a bigger business I was there for 10 years and developed a team of writers, team of proofreaders. I started to understand and learn through that experience, what is branding, what is creative brand expression, what is brand strategy, how do words fit into that? And that was the experience that really gave me my career.
That's interesting. I want to stop you there just for
Sure.
a quick second, because I think as we're hearing what you're saying, a lot of the stuff you were doing on the side was a little bit of the path to your next full-time role. And so you're in the baking space, you're doing the newsletter, then ultimately that evolves into a writing career. Mm-hmm. And then, you just went through the last scenario when you said you were doing some stuff on the side that ultimately, morphed into your full-time role for 10 plus years. So that's kind of an interesting mm-hmm. dynamic, because what you're doing on the side is almost a stepping stone to where you're going in the future. Did you look at it that way?
I hoped that the things I was kind of hustling, I really didn't mm-hmm. know that I was really just trying to find my way based on like, I can do that. Oh, write that thing. That's something I can do. Oh, tell that story. Yeah, I get it. I can do that. But I lacked the business context. It really wasn't until that later chapter that I had the ability to start setting meaningful goals and being like, oh, I think I want this step, or maybe that step is right for me and this is what I should do to get there. The beginning was really just like, who will pay me to do something? Honestly, I'm not saying this is ideal, but it's like, who will pay me to do something that I'm good at doing? And again, I used to think, oh, I was the only one. But as an older professional now, I think most people start their careers in that way. Yes. With not that much clarity.
Well, in experience, you got to jump in and kind of, what do they say, gain your stripes, or, school of hard knocks type thing. It was an interesting path you went there. I wanted to make sure the audience understood that, because you went from baking to writing, and like, how do you get there? So thanks for walking us down memory lane.
Yeah, for sure. And then, once I did finally, and it was such a relief and such an excitement to me when I realized, oh my gosh, I have a career. Like, whoa, look at this. I'm a thing. I have a title and I have like a whole industry I understand. I'll never forget it. I was in a big town hall meeting one day and someone was speaking. They had a speaker. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh my God, I could go to business school. Like, I could get an MBA. And I realized, understand business. This is something I like. And it was really a breakthrough. So from there, I started being able to think more intentionally about my career. And that was around the time that I was approached. I got recruited out to a startup called Craftsy in the Denver area. It was a direct-to-consumer tech startup, very different. It was right when social media marketing was really, really taking off, very different from what I had done in CPG. And I went for it. I got brought in to work on branding there, and I was with that company for about 3 or 4 years. And candidly, it wasn't a great experience for me. I would say one of the bigger things I learned is that like the sort of tech startup culture was not a great fit for me, and it's not a great fit for someone who is sort of an old school brand marketer. There's a lot of tension there, but I was extremely grateful for the experience. I did it because I knew I had to get outside of CPG and see a different industry to keep growing. I had enough sort of self-awareness, enough career ambition at that point to have that sense. So I went there for several years, did a lot of learning, made some wonderful connections, wasn't frankly as happy as I had been in my other corporate role. And then COVID came. And, with COVID, I was laid off from that job. And that's when everything kind of got crazy and ultimately took me to where I am now with my own consultancy.
Well, let's stay on that career piece.
Mm-hmm.
In our previous discussions, you've referenced what you called turning points in your life and your career. And I think we've all gone through that in some way, shape, or form. So maybe walk us through one or both of those timeframes in your life, how you overcame the adversity of those situations, and maybe how those turning points shaped where you are today or who you are today.
Yeah, for sure. Two huge ones. And I know a lot of listeners will have been through one or both of these experiences because they're common and yet incredibly intense and personal and individual to each person when you go through them. The first was I left a marriage when my children were two. I'm the proud mom of two amazing daughters, amazing grown women daughters. But when they were 2 and 4, I left a marriage that was not a healthy situation for all of us, for the three of us. So I was at the time sort of working part-time, freelance writing, freelance food styling, didn't have a whole lot going in terms of a professional engine of my own, and found myself suddenly really, really needing full-time work, really needing money. Financial security really reared its head in my life in a frankly terrifying way. And I think it's really important for us to talk out loud about that. And I know a lot of people go through that. I also want to caveat it out of respect to your listeners and respect to all the fellow single parents out there who have made their way. I had a lot of safety nets. I had a family that could help me if I needed help. I do not want to over dramatize the financial insecurity I was facing, but according to my value system and the value I placed on independence and how important it was to me to find my way in my life, it was very frightening because it was not clear to me that I'd be able to do that. And that was sort of an essential for living the life that I want to live, was not relying on others for money. So that was a huge turning point, and that it was in that period that I was hustling with the food styling and found my way, thank God, to the job with White Wave Foods. And that's why I say that's the job that gave me my career, because it really came when I needed it. And then it was on me to know how to grow. Not everyone who gets hired as an entry-level creative professional in a creative department will grow to a director level role and into a strategy role and all of those things. But I'm grateful that I had those opportunities to try to do that and was ultimately successful in doing it. So that was one enormous turning point, and driven really by a lot of fear, but also I guess a lot of confidence somewhere in there, because I was like, I got to do it, and I did it.
Well, let's dive into that fear a little bit. Fear is a word that not a lot of people talk about, but we obviously all experience it in some way, shape, or form. You had talked about the financial and emotional toll. You just kind of referenced it, and maybe that fear when you went through that divorce. I mean, what were some of the things you did to overcome that as you look back?
Wow. It's such a vivid time in my memory. And even though it was a very hard and scary time, it was a wonderful time. I was defining my life the way I was moving out of a life that didn't make any sense into one that did make sense. So my values just snapped into place. Like everything, I was like, I am now behaving in a way that is concordant with what I really care about, which is independence, dignity, joy, embracing life with energy. I'd been in a bad scene. So I think that is the well of strength that I was drawing on to face down the fear. And I think there was a lot of compartmentalization. because if I allowed myself to think about money too deeply, it was like I'm going to be living under a bridge with my kids. This is not true, but that is how it felt.
Yep.
So it was a lot of compartmentalization that I think can sometimes be a healthy thing in times of crisis. And I went with it. I was not sleeping at that time very well. I would fall asleep fine at night and I would be up at 4 a.m. And I remember thinking, thank you, Mother Nature, because I needed all that time to get done everything I needed to do. I was caring for these little kids and trying to figure it all out and move and work and like try to figure it all out. And I was like, okay, I can't sleep very well at this chapter of my life, but that's a gift because it's giving me a few extra hours in every day and I need them. So that was the way my brain was working. It was a crisis mode and a survival mode that I needed at the time.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's interesting. We talk about self-talk quite a bit on this piece, and it sounds like you probably had a lot of self-talk going on.
So much, and so
during
much
that
good
phase.
self-talk after a period of like really a lot of kind of crazy self-talk. So yeah, when you find yourself saying nicer things, kinder things to yourself, like it's pay attention because that's a good thing. It's a sign you're on a good track.
That's a great piece of advice, and one that I think we always forget on a daily basis. I just heard something the other day about audit your language to yourself on a daily basis, and it's easy to, depending what mood you're in and what's going on in your life, what you perceive is going on in your life, you got to continue to audit that. But
Yeah.
let's talk about turning point 2.
Yeah. So turning point 2, they feel so closely related in my mind. Turning point 2 was when I was laid off from my job. It was right around the time of COVID. So my job with the tech startup, and it was really scary. I think for a lot of reasons, many of which were just that emotionally it was putting me right back where I had been when I first got divorced. And that was pretty irrational. That was pretty much an emotional thing because I'd worked 15 years in between. I was fine. It was fine. I had a severance package, like it was fine, but it did not feel fine. I went right back, as we do, to the kind of fear-driven patterns. I was like, I need a job, I need a job, I need a job. Like, I have to have a corporate job. I have to have the corporate health insurance. I have to have all those things. And I think so many of us really believe that, even those of us who might be better suited to maybe working for ourselves like I'm doing now. But in my mind, that was too scary. That was not secure. Wouldn't make enough money. It just was like a closed door. Even though it was really, really what I wanted, it was like a closed door. So
that was the story you were telling yourself.
Exactly. I was like, I need. It just was such well-developed muscles from raising the kids and being in that survival mode of, single parent, which is so common. I'm not trying to make myself sound like a hero. Millions of people do it and do it very well. But anyone who does it knows it is a survival mode. And that was such a well-developed muscle that even though my kids were like practically out of the house and everything's okay, that's still how I felt. So I spent, the better part of a year applying for senior level jobs, communications director and verbal creative director and, story lead and like all these different kinds of jobs in my wheelhouse, most of which I really did not want. And I would get pretty far down the road and I was doing okay. Like I was having a lot of interviews. I was having a lot of interest. I was making a lot of good connections. I was never getting the job. I was everybody's favorite second pick. And, then I'm thinking I'm 50 and, that's a real thing too. Like I get it. You can get someone who's 35 and probably really, really good and really, really talented. And you maybe can get them cheaper and you're not going to be questioning, are they in their last chapter mode? I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I was against a brick wall. And I did have a lovely period of not working very hard. I'm very grateful for it. I had my sourdough moment, but eventually, I was starting to be like, okay, I really do need to start earning and these corporate jobs are not coming through. So I sort of hung out my shingle for freelancing. And every writer is like always freelancing a little, but I hung out my shingle like, okay, I want work. I'm going to freelance more. And to my amazement, it really just poured in. My old network from my early CPG days, anyone who's listening, thank you. They just really showed up and everyone was like, I've got projects for you. And next thing I know, I'm like kind of working and I'm kind of bringing in money and I'm so happy. I'm in my pajamas. I'm with my cat. I was so happy. I'm not feeling that corporate pressure of like, you got to try to be something you're not, or you've got to try to show up a certain way. I was like, I'm just showing up in a really raw, honest way. Like, this is what I'm good at. This is what I can do for you. That thing, I'm not good at it. I can't do it for you. It was so refreshing. It felt so good. And I went from there. And, I just was kind of like, okay, I guess I'm really doing this. I set a goal for year one. I doubled my goal in year one. I took
Which is
it
awesome.
double my goal. And I was like elated. It was the most empowering. Just, it's been the most incredible thing. And I've been going from there. I didn't double my goal again. Year one was incredible. Year two was also good. I'm in year 4 now, and it's still good. And it's a job now. In the beginning, it was such a honeymoon. It was like playtime, but it's a job now. But I still just love it, and I'm one of those people for whom the crisis of COVID and the crisis of the lockdowns really opened doors for me and really showed me a new relationship to work that is the way I am built to work, and I'm really grateful for it.
Well, let's talk about that starting your own business, because I think a lot of people think about it, as
Mm-hmm.
you kind of probably have off and on throughout your career. But the fear of starting the business, the fear of actually being able to, achieve their goals through starting their own company. Maybe walk us through that. Is there anything that stands out to you of, when you were fearful about doing that? And then the other piece I would ask is, what type of advice would you give to people that are kind of in that same realm that you were a few years
Mm-hmm.
back?
I'm very clear on what worked for me. And I think it might work for some others, but I'm sure that it would not work for everybody. I have friends and colleagues who also went out on their own in that same period of time, did it totally differently. And I have huge admiration for them. These are people who really built companies. They're like, I'm getting office space, I'm hiring people, and I didn't have that kind of nerve. And I'm old. Like, I need to sustain myself for 10 years doing this. I don't need to raise a family and sustain myself for 25 years doing this. And that's a huge difference of mindset. So it depends where you are in your life and what your needs are. But for where I was in my life, and I realized I had the opportunity to build a really beautiful final, and I hope long, final chapter of my career, what empowered me and what worked for me was creeping into it in cowardly fashion, to be honest. I wasn't like, I'm opening a big firm. I was like, okay, I'm setting up my LLC. Okay, I've got 3 clients. Oh, now I have 4. Okay, now I've got 5. Okay. And I just took it as it came, and I took it small. I wanted everything to be small and manageable. And maybe that's unorthodox business advice, because I know that it's good to have a vision, and I really admire people who are like, have this huge vision. I just focused on what I know I'm good at. I focused on giving my clients the absolute best I could give them, like just really, really doing the very best work I'm capable of. And I know that work is good. And that's been my North Star. And I didn't take on things that would stretch me too thin. I didn't, when I got to the place where I was like, there was a lot of yes, there was a lot of sure, I'll try that, of course. But there was also a lot of no, like I don't need to chase that thing that doesn't move me and that doesn't feel like my area of what I love to do, because there's enough over here. So my path was a lot about recognizing what's enough and really focusing in on what is working for me. And what a privilege to be at a phase where I was able to do that, and what a incredible joy that it like really worked. Like it really worked. So yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's important for people to get clear. And I think we all struggle with this a little bit, as what's our path, right? And we look at
Mm-hmm.
other people's paths and we try and maybe replicate those. And those may or may not be the path that we want to go down. And you said that you had some friends, old colleagues that took a bit of a different path, and that path wasn't right for you. So you got real clear on what that path looked like for you. And then I like the whole path of adding clients one at a time. And we just launched another podcast episode on the platform here about habits and tiny habits and hitting milestones and then going to the next milestone. And the way you hit goals is not going from 0 to 60, but 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. And as you continue to build confidence, build validation of your skill set, your business, it becomes a very different and more sustainable way to build a business and maintain a business. Because, at the end of the day, if we're going to shoot for the stars and we miss, sometimes that's not the outcome we want either. So.
You just reminded me of such a good piece of advice I got from a colleague who that has really stayed with me, and I love passing it along. So this is a great place to pass it along. When I was first starting, and he's one of those who had started an agency, and he has this fabulous, wonderful design agency that I continue to work with, and I'm full of admiration for them. It's Stone Strategy and Design, if anyone wants to look them up. When I first got started and they were hiring me for projects and, supporting me in that way. And he said, what are you going to do when you succeed? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, everyone goes into this with the backup plan. Like, how much savings do I have? How long can I run with no work? What's my backup plan if I fail? He said, what are you going to do if you succeed? And he shared with me that when he had started succeeding, he remembered like literally being in tears because he had so much too much work. He just so overextended himself because he hadn't known what to do if he really succeeded. And that stayed with me. And I think that was part of what influenced me to realize, hey, be thoughtful about how you want to grow. Don't chase just every old thing. Be thoughtful about what you're looking for. Bigger doesn't have to be better. It has to be what you want your own success to look like. And that, I think, saved me from a lot of pitfalls.
That's a very interesting perspective. I like that. I appreciate you sharing that because I agree. We always say, okay, how much runway do we have? What if this doesn't go well versus saying, what if it does? What does success look like and what do we do from there? And what are you going to do with that? So that's a different mindset. Totally.
No, it's a good one. And I didn't invent it, but my friend did. And it's really a helpful one.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. Well, you are preparing for success now because you have a successful company. Let's dive into that company. It's called the Liz Ellis Word Company.
Yes,
maybe give the audience an idea of what kind of work do you engage in or the services do you provide, and maybe what do certain customers look like just from an industry standpoint?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I really am all things words. So it's B2B and B2C, and it is everything running the gamut from creative work. So real marketing, copywriting, naming, taglines, write the website, write the packaging, like true creative work, all the way over to strategy. Whether that is, sort of internal strategic guidance type of work, whether it's a brand strategy, figuring out, your brand framework and architecture and personality, tone of voice, values, all that kind of brand strategy stuff. Also more communication strategy. I do a lot of B2B. So that's kind of what is your whole organizational wide key messages? What's that framework? What's the hierarchy of those messages? How might they activate across your communications mix? So I am a generalist for sure. It's very broad. And I really, really like it that way. I think that's part of what keeps me good at what I do is that in any given day, I have a pretty good mix of strategy and creative because I'm definitely one of those balanced brains. So it's all me. I am a solo operator. When someone hires me, I am all they get and they get all of me. And like we've been talking about, that's kind of where it sits for me.
That's what works for you. What we'll do too is we'll link the Liz Ellis Word Company website link to the show notes as well, so people can go and check that out, learn a little bit more about what you're doing, see your creative work and strategy work there as well. As I think you have quite a few examples on your website that I noticed anyway, so they can go check that out. So we will, just for the audience's awareness, we'll link the Liz Ellis Word Company website to the show notes so you can check it out at the conclusion of the episode.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You bet. Well, this is a big question coming up. And this is when we ask all of our guests, and we always say, noting that lifelong learning and growth is part of the journey, and we're all chasing our own version of success, which you and I just talked about for the last few minutes here. What is Liz Ellis ultimately chasing?
You warned me this was coming, so I reflected on it, and my first answer was like joy, just like enjoying myself, feeling good, and I thought, well, that's not very interesting. So what's behind that? And for me, I think it's balance. It's balance. I have learned that in this chapter where I have the great luxury to be working on my own and kids are grown, and it's a really sweet chapter. And I've learned that I do best with a lot of different things: the creative, the strategic, the work, the relaxation, the creative work, the creative non-work of hobbies, the solitude and the community. Just what I want is to build a professional life and a home life where I have the balance to fit everything in. And it's not perfect, but I think I've come a long way in that, and it feels good.
It's not perfect, but it's perfect for you, maybe is the right way to put it, right? So it's always an interesting question because it's actually, and that's why I wanted to give you a heads up. And it's a tough question sometimes to answer. And we've even gone through where in certain times of your life, it might get a little cloudy. And, it's what you want 10 years ago might be different than what you want now. And 10 years from now, it might be different as well. So we appreciate the thought you put into that and, sharing that with us here today. But we're going to wind things down here a bit, Liz. Want to thank you for your time. So many of us begin our careers and end up in very different places, right? Similar to what you went through. We also experience, let's be honest, we all experience triumphs, challenges along the way. And I'm sure your story is going to resonate with a lot of people. And we really appreciate you sharing it with us, even especially those turning points as well. I think that was very authentic, and, it's something that you went through and shared with us, and appreciate you getting that vulnerability out there as well. So as people want to look and find Liz Ellis, where's the best place to contact you?
LinkedIn is great. You'll see me on there, and I'm actually Elizabeth Ellis on there, which I know is bad branding for a brand strategist. But LinkedIn is great, and I would be delighted to hear from anyone who listens to this and is curious to chat more.
Perfect. For the audience's awareness, in addition to your corporate website or your business website, we'll also link your LinkedIn profile, if you're okay with that, to the show notes as well, and they can get right to Elizabeth Ellis on LinkedIn. So thanks again, Liz. If there's anything else you want to share with the audience or any words of wisdom you want to leave us with, I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you. Well, this has been really fun. I feel a little emotional, kind of going down memory lane. Like you said, it's been really fun. And, I guess my last thing, thinking about where I am now and where I've been and what the whole journey's been, and this is a piece of advice I give my children, is the value of tapping into the things you love as a child. I'm in such a sweet phase of life right now, and really what I spend my time doing, honestly, is writing, singing, and dancing and baking, because that's my exercise. I sing in a choir. Baking is a hobby that I love, and I write all the time, obviously for work. And when I look at where I was, at age 9, that's what I loved. That, I was a little ballet girl, and I wrote poems, and I baked cookies, and I love to sing. So I just think it's cool, like, to think back on what you loved as a child, and can you pull those threads forward in your life? Because for me, that's turned out to be a real key.
Awesome advice. Yeah, it sounds like you've come full circle there from a 9-year-old girl to doing similar things now. So, well, congratulations on your journey. I mean, obviously you've gone through a lot of things and come out on the other side extremely successful, overcame a lot of adversity, and you're living your version of success right now. So congrats on that, and, all the best in the future. And we look forward to staying in touch, Liz.
I would love that. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
All right. Take care.
You too.